Senate Bill 5 becomes law. For now.
From the Battelle Studio at WOSU at COSI, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Joe Hallett, Senior Editor, The Columbus Dispatch. Karen Kassler, State House Bureau Chief, Ohio Public Radio and TV. Michael Daniels, co-publisher of Outlook Media. And Gene Krebs of the Greater Ohio Policy Center.
The bill to limit the collective bargaining rights of public employees became law this week. Well, at least it was approved by the legislature and signed by the governor. Flanked by GOP leaders, Governor Kasich put his signature on Senate Bill 5 on the final day of March, successfully avoiding April Fool's Day, we should point out. The governor said the law will cut government costs and bring government workers in line with private workers.
When your average private sector worker in the state of Ohio pays 23% of their health care costs, of their own health care costs, and when a city worker, the average city worker in Ohio, pays 9%, this is frankly an effort to try to restore the balance.
The bill mandates state workers pay 15% of their health insurance premiums. It bars them from striking. It eliminates binding arbitration, and it bans unions from requiring so-called fair share payments from non-union members. The provisions and the plight of state workers sparked some bitter debate in the House.
I think the vast majority of them are very capable of doing good work and getting along with their managers without having some union tell them what to do every day of their lives. I have more faith in my workforce than you do.
So talk all you want about how this is going to save budgets and how this is going to save us money, because this is about union busting. Don't ever lie to us, and don't be hypocritical, and don't dance around it as if it's finances, because you know what it is. It's to bust the union.
Karen Kassler, just when you thought this fight couldn't get any nastier, there it was.
And there was the House debate. Yeah.
Why so nasty?
It's very partisan. And I mean, it's partisan in the sense that there were no Democrats who moved over to the Republican side to support it, but there were some Republicans who voted with the Democrats on this. But, I mean, this is a very personal issue to so many people because you're talking about people's paychecks. But on the other side, for a lot of people, they're very frustrated. They feel like they're paying too much in taxes. And so it's a really personal issue for a lot of people. And a lot of people, I think, don't feel like they're getting the full story. They don't feel like they understand exactly what the bill will do and exactly how it will affect everyone, that there's a lot of spin here and they're getting kind of lost in the midst of it. And I think that's kind of fueling some of the anger over this. And it's only going to get worse. If you think this was bad, just wait as it just gets worse and worse as we get closer to November.
Yeah. Now, the 5 Republicans voted against Senate Bill 5. I heard talk last week that it was going to be a lot closer, but it wasn't, Joe. What was a wider gap in margin than most people thought it was going to be?
No, I don't think so. I wasn't surprised by the vote at all, frankly. It was still largely a partisan vote, and we're seeing both sides view this as a big moment in history. I mean, the Kasich side, the Republicans, businesses, even average taxpayers see this is a moment when it's time to rein in generous packages of public employees that regular citizens don't get. On the other side, the public employee unions and the Democratic Party, which they largely support with their campaign finances, view this as a threat to their very existence. So we are girding for a colossal battle in the days ahead.
And I think the thing that still amazes me is to come back to this and to somehow continue to bring the argument back to blame the union employees for the benefits packages that they have. It's called collective bargaining for a reason, because there's some bargaining that goes on. The unions put forward and say, we want A, B, C, and D. But ultimately, there's a group of elected officials sitting across the other side of the table who either agree or disagree to those ideas. And the whole argument about arbitration and binding arbitration and so forth is a tempest in a teapot, because it's less than 2% of all the contracts that ever go there. So this is just, I think, a case of the Republicans being able to blame the unions for being good negotiators.
Gene, could they have just said, put in state law that state workers have to pay 15% of their health care premiums and just leave it at that without doing the other changes in collective bargaining?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that everybody else could have done in this. That's a very odd thing to bring out here, is that on one hand, folks were saying, you never had us come to the table, and on the other hand, they said, well, we're not even going to offer an amendment to this bill. It's, on the Democratic side. I think that what you're seeing here is it's a classic case of you have different viewpoints, it's systems versus individuals. But I think going back to some of the issues that have been raised, having been a school board member and sitting across from that, the arbitration system in Ohio is flawed as to how you do, the fact finding and all that, and reforms need to be done. And the thing I keep telling everybody is that if your section of code has not been addressed for a decade, you need to go in there and start looking at it and see what reforms you need to have done. This section of code has not been touched for 27 years. Undoubtedly, some things have changed. We need to go back in. And actually, if the Democrats and the labor unions were smart, they would have done this in the last session when they controlled the House and come up with some modest reforms. So you look back at Vern Reif, not one of my favorite persons, but he consistently did that. He would look and see what reforms need to be done and try to do things a little bit proactively. They should have done that.
Would Democrats have seen this coming, though, in the last session?
I got to tell you, it goes, look, the last session, people tried to tell them that according to the macro political trends, they were going to lose the House and they better take the best deal they possibly could on reapportionment. And they thumbed their nose at that.
I don't disagree with you that my party missed a huge chance on reapportionment. I think we got a little cocky and we're paying for it when it comes to that. As far as this reopening and taking a look at a 27-year-old collective bargaining law, I think the problem with that was that the Democrats only controlled one house. And I think it was sort of that if we open the barn door, once the door's open and the horse is out, there's nothing that we can do, and the Senate's going to turn it into a camel and force it down our throats. And I think that's what they were really concerned about in terms of opening it up under a Democratic House.
How about these fair share dues? These are dues if you're a public employee and you don't want to join the union, but you get the benefits of the union, the wages, the health benefits, the vacation and work rules. You have to pay automatically fair share payments, which are roughly the same amount as the dues. Is it fair to let those folks off the hook?
You want that one, Joe?
Probably not, because they are benefiting from everything the union negotiates, and to require them not to pay dues for that benefit does seem unfair, at least to my way of thinking. But this, again, is a way to gradually move in the eyes of Republicans, particularly conservative Republicans, Ohio to a right-to-work state. And we had people on the House floor openly say that's the goal here. And they'll do it in stages, and this is the beginning of that.
Which I think is exactly why Representative Hagan stood up and said what everybody knows. This is nothing more than a union-busting bill. This has nothing to do with saving money and giving Mayor Coleman and City Council better means to negotiate. This is the camel's nose under the tent toward becoming a right-to-work state, and it's quite simply a union-busting bill.
And that's going to be the campaign in the fall that the unions are going to run to try to repeal Senate Bill 5.
With much more froth and much more blood and much more avarice, yes.
Okay, let's get to that. Of course, the nasty fight is far from over. It could be on this November's ballot. Union supporters and Democrats vowed to collect the 231,000 signatures needed to put the law on the ballot and force a referendum. Polls have shown that Ohioans oppose the limits on collective bargaining, but it is far from overwhelming opposition. Michael Daniels, 350,000 public employee union members, 231 signatures needed. The math seems to work.
645,000 signatures delivered to the House chamber before the vote.
So this is going to be on the ballot.
This is going to be on the ballot.
Extraordinary happens.
Yeah. Now we've seen extraordinary things, but is this going to be on the ballot? Absolutely, this is going to be on the ballot. Which is, I think, exactly why I think the Republicans knew this was going to be on the ballot. Which is why they probably, on their part, smartly passed it, got it on the table before April 6th, so that it is on the ballot in 2011 and not in 2012. It stays the law for a year less anyway. It gets us only through this November. And in 2012, I think in a presidential election with Obama on the ticket, you would have expected a much higher Democratic turnout. So I think the Democrats have to work that much harder this year.
Well, maybe or maybe not, because right now, there's still the possibility out there the Humane Society of the United States could come back with their concerns about some of the changes that were made to the Livestock Care Standards Board.
That's right.
And they may also mount a ballot issue. Certainly their voters would be more inclined to see the Senate Bill 5 repeal as being a sympathetic cause. So that could drive more Democratic voters to the ballot. So who knows?
Well, this is going to be fascinating for people like Karen and me over the summer to watch how this campaign unfolds, because as Michael said, you basically got 360,000 votes against Senate Bill 5 in the public employee members, and add their spouses, and you probably got 700,000 built-in votes against. It will be interesting if the retain the bill side can match the kind of passion that the unions will bring to the table. One person who will star in this, whether he wants to or not, is John Kasich. He's got a 30% approval rating. Knowing him, he may want to make himself the face of the campaign.
He successfully has, unlike Scott Walker in Wisconsin, he has successfully played a trailing role in the bill in the legislature. That's fallen to Shannon Jones.
The Democrats, in part, will make this a referendum on Kasich.
Absolutely.
And we can envision commercials for the repeal side where we have sympathetic police and firemen and so forth on there talking about their commitment to the community. But on the other side will portray this as a taxpayer against the unions fight. And we'll see small business owners saying, look, I don't get these kind of benefits, but I have to pay for them.
In my conversations with public sector labor union heads, the number they keep throwing out is $30 million is how much they're expecting to spend on this. There's a wild card in this, though, that has not really come up in any of the media or anything, and that is the Tea Party. And my sources inside the Tea Party also tell me they're going to make this into a top-flight issue. That they view this, for the same reasons the labor unions view this as a watershed event, they view this as a watershed event. So we will find out from here, does the Tea Party have staying power? Are they going to be a force in Ohio politics
Is this
going
National
forward?
Tea Party or Ohio Tea Party?
Ohio Tea Party.
The Ohio Tea Party has been kind of...
They did testify, though, on Senate Bill 5, and some of them were calling themselves the silent majority, and so that'll be interesting to see if they stay silent.
And it's how many
and
people,
if they're a majority.
How many people can they bring to the table, and how many dollars can they bring to the table? Because, as I think someone alluded to, sort of tongue-in-cheek, but it's absolutely true, the big winner, no matter what happens in this race, is television advertising.
Right.
Because there will be easily $20 to $30 million spent on each side of this. But I think it's also going to be interesting. The governor said he wasn't going to make this a political deal. He wasn't going to, he's going to be very respectful of the other side, but he still had a ceremonial signing. And the Republican Party has already sent out a fundraising thing with Kasich saying, I was able to sign SB 5, send me $5 or $10 so we can put it to the Democrats even harder.
The fundraising letter came out 3 or 4 hours before the notification that he was going to sign it.
Yeah.
So.
That's how many of us found out that he was going to sign it on Thursday and not Friday.
What is the ballot language going to look like? Are voters going to have to vote no to say yes to unions?
Probably. Unfortunately, probably.
Is that what's going to be? So you vote.
It all depends on the ballot board argument. I mean, it depends on how they frame the question, and that's critical. All these little steps are so critical in getting this approved or repealed.
But generally, in a case like this, where the bill has passed and been signed into law, the question usually comes out and says something like, shall the version of Senate Bill 5 as passed on such and such a day be repealed? And it's unfortunate, but I think that's unfortunately what the referendum could end up looking like.
Shall it be repealed? That'd be a yes vote, wouldn't it?
Yes, for you.
Oh, you're right.
But that's a question. I mean, these are exactly the confusion factors that voters face when they come in and they're not really certain about it.
There will not be any confusion over this issue. People are going to know what it's all about by the time they vote.
Okay. Topic 3, when John Kasich released his budget a couple of weeks ago, he maintained he actually was increasing state aid to local school districts. That is technically true. But what he neglected to point out was that schools will see the quicker than expected elimination of state money that comes from the tangible personal property tax and the utility tax. Now, not to get too deep in Ohio tax law, but let me try to explain. Those business taxes have been eliminated, and the state had promised school districts it would phase out the loss of revenue from those taxes over several years, softening the blow. Now that money disappears almost immediately, well, within a year or two. Joe Hallett, Dispatch reports $96 million will be lost by Central Ohio districts alone because of this move over the next year.
And that'll
so.
be on top of $28 million lost by the Central Ohio District in stimulus money.
Yeah, the federal money.
Superintendents were anticipating the loss of stimulus money. They were anticipating a decline in state aid. What they did not see coming